You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Welcome to the Writing Black Joy podcast, where we celebrate the joyful narratives of the Black creatives writing their names on the pages of history and on our hearts. I am your host, Sophia Robinson. Here, you'll find conversations with amazing Black creatives, learn more about their projects and the joy that they're bringing into the world, find inspiration for your own creative ventures, and dive deep into the topics that shape our narratives. The guests on this podcast are all sorts of creatives, from writers of fiction and nonfiction to playwrights and actors, visual artists, podcasters, and so much more who are bringing joy to their narratives. So, if you are a writer, a creative, or a lover of the arts, or you simply want to hear some good conversations, keep on listening and welcome to the show. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy. Thank you so much for being here, for tuning into this season so far. And if you haven't already done so, or if this is your first time, just go ahead, hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share it with a friend, especially those friends of yours whose love language is receiving podcast recommendations like mine is. Today's conversation is with Aisha Shillingford of Intelligent Mischief, and I was so intrigued by the name when I first learned about her, and I loved our conversation. So first, a little bit about Aisha. Aisha Shillingford is an anti-disciplinary artist, experiential futurist, and world builder originally from Trinidad and Tobago. She is an archivist of Black futures. She is the artistic director of Intelligent Mischief, a creative studio unleashing the power of Black radical imagination to shape the future. She's a former fellow and artist in residence at the Laundromat Project, former mentor at the new Museum Incubator, and a former project fellow at NYU ITP. Her work has been commissioned by the Anchorage Museum, Earthseed, and Good Mirrors, to name a few. She has co-created experiential futurist installations at Carnegie Hall, Tone Gallery in Memphis, and a virtual 24-hour rave, all based on collectively imagined future worlds in which Black people are thriving, sovereign, and free. She has crafted several immersive sonic experiences to guide individuals and groups in creating palpable, irresistible visions of beautiful futures. Aisha and I talk about how her creative journey was impacted by growing up in Trinidad, by Carnival, by her father who was an academic, and by living with art students as a community organizer. How making art led her to the intersection of art and social change. We talked about Intelligent Mischief, a cultural futures lab whose purpose is to unleash Black imagination to shape the future. How she defines art and sees its potential for impact. How art can be a space for communicating social issues. How she became involved with organizations crafting narratives around reparations. Connecting the imagining of new worlds to ideas around repair. Bringing a big vision to life and creating a team around it. And so much more. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Welcome back to the Writing Black Joy podcast. Today I have with me Aisha, as I would have introduced in the beginning of the conversation. Aisha, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is kind of an impromptu recording, and I'm so excited about it. I couldn't wait to record. So I can't wait to dive into chatting about you and also about Intelligent Mischief. So let us begin with you. Tell us a little bit journey as a creative.
Sure. Well, I always like to start my journey by thinking about my childhood a little bit. I grew up in Trinidad. My mom she worked for the government, like, in the Ministry of Industry, but I knew my mom as an actress. She was an actress, is an actress. Like, she directed and produced theater in Trinidad. And she also loved carnival. Like, she would make carnival costumes as part of the band, whatever band she was playing in. So my mom was just this amazing creative person with all of these creative friends and collaborators. And then my stepfather, who I grew up with my whole life, is an economist, and was a professor at university. And so he was very much about, I remember being like 12 years old or less, and he would like hand me like the United Nations development reports to read, you know? And so that's how I grew up. And, true to form, my father was much more interested in shaping my academic future than my mom. My mom was very like easygoing, like go to school, do well, whatever, but, become who you want to become. My father was very much like, you have to study 5 hours a day. You have to like do well at these exams. You have to study the sciences and get into, these programs. And so I did that. I did what my father wanted me to do. I even was a research assistant at his consulting firm for like a year or two. Like, I went on to study like social science at university. I studied environmental policy. I wanted to be a consultant. Like, I basically wanted to be him. And I ended up working in community organizing, community development, like in the US, like for about 20 years. I did like, building communities, power to determine their own futures, network building, movement building, social movement building, and so on. And then somewhere along the way, I was like, I just want to start making art, like just as a hobby. I didn't really think too deeply about it. I just felt like, I was taking a couple of art classes here and there, and I just wanted to like, I don't know, feel connected to that side. I think probably it's because I was living with, at the time I had a lot of roommates who were in art school, and I was like kind of interested in this feeling of like making something out of nothing, or like having a concept occur and like cultivating it with my hands. So I started doing that and started collecting materials. I really was inspired by this artist, El Anatsui. He's like a Ghanaian artist who lives in Nigeria, or a Nigerian artist who lives in Ghana. I can't remember which way. But I was inspired because he was making a lot of art with like discarded materials. And so I started collecting random discarded materials, and eventually just, gravitated more and more towards the intersection of those spaces. So art for social change, cultural strategy, things like that. Anything I could do to bring a creative and artistic lens to the social change work that I was doing. Then in 2019, I was working at a think tank for social movements, and I just felt really strongly like I need to like stop this and be an artist. And the opportunity arose, like just through some freelance work that I was doing, that was able to do, that allowed me to just dedicate more and more time to art making. And around the same time, like I became part of my partner had a culture lab, which is Intelligent Mischief, essentially, which I just joined full time in maybe 2023. But I started spending more of my time making art, bringing art to life. And the more I articulated it as my purpose or what I was yearning for, the more opportunities came to make art in relationship to kind of some of the same deep social questions that I was considering. I think one of the most transformative opportunities that really launched me into seeing myself as an artist was in 2017. I had the chance to collaborate with Christopher Cozier, he's an artist based in Trinidad, who's very much like, he mentors a lot of younger artists, and he runs like a artist space there called Alice Yard. And he came to the States to collaborate on a project with another organization that we were connected to. And I just got the chance to see firsthand like how an artist might look at the world and also look at the materials available to them. And it was so different from how a social change strategist would do the same thing. And I was just like fascinated by sort of like the impulse with which an artist might take action, or, how they might make meaning and sort of be in a conversation in just a very different way. And that like really intrigued me. Yeah, and then it's just been flowing like ever since in terms of getting my hands on materials and turning them into images that seem to resonate with people. A lot.
I love that. Like my brain is going in so many different directions. I'm gonna start with what you said about your childhood, because it's so interesting. My dad was in theater
Oh wow.
little, but I grew up. He used to do that and his like day job, quote unquote. And me growing up, I knew of the theater work because he did a lot of that when we were, I guess, before I was born and when I was young. And growing up, it was family responsibilities and working in a bank and all of that. And but I know, like you talked about your stepdad, for us, I know he wanted us to do well in school and have good careers and have an education that someone could not take away from us, right?
Yep.
I appreciate, even if, I spent a long time just wanting to write and be creative, and quite appreciate that. So it's just how those two worlds collide, right? But I think, and I love the sort of collision for yours. It's so funny. I was saying to you earlier, I teach in the university now. We were at a meeting this afternoon talking about research and impact. Center was like, she came out of, I work in healthcare. So she had come out of the healthcare environment and looking at healthcare research and the impact it has, and had gone into like the art school. And it's so hard to, if you're doing something like going for a grant or like this type of thing, it's really hard to pin down, or so she's saying, she finds it very hard to kind of pin down the impact of research that happens in creative fields, art, like, and it like, whereas I feel like art has an enormous impact. I feel like it's almost perfect marriage to match those creative processes with social justice, healthcare, whatever field you're in. I feel like they're a perfect match, but I feel like so often they're kept separate in a way. And so then it can make it can then come with that sort of idea of like art is frivolous or whatever the case.
Right.
And these other causes are like, these are the important thing. Whereas I feel like art great impact on, like, I talked to one of my work colleagues and she's like, everything I learned about history, I learned from some film. And I'm like, yeah, because art will impact you in ways that you're not even aware of.
Right.
I love that you kind of brought those together, and we'll talk obviously about the project that's launching this month. But I love that you were able to bring those together from the backgrounds that you had that were from, both of those directions. I really like that. So let's talk a little bit about this current project that you're working on within Intelligent Mischief and this space that's going to be open. Tell me a little bit about Intelligent Mischief and this sort of project that's launching in a few weeks.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. So Intelligent Mischief we describe ourselves as a creative studio, and I think we're going to add like Cultural Futures Lab, whose purpose is to unleash Black imagination to shape the future. So, everything we do is about using art and sort of cultivating dream spaces and opportunities, tools, and so on that help Black folks across the diaspora reconnect to their imagination and also harness that imagination to cultivate like a shared story of the future. One of our assumptions is that there's, at least in the US, like there's there's certain people whose imaginations get to be articulated, like whose visions for the future are sort of like driving like policy and driving tech and driving, what they think housing is and how our communities develop. And there's very little formal space for our imaginations to shape that. And then ironically, however, like every advance in this society that has created more freedom and liberation for all has been as a result of Black imagination, or, the imagination of people in general who have been marginalized. So we're like, oh, it's kind of ironic that a future is being created based on the imaginations of people who, have a lot of resources and access, but that's never resulted in something very good for this society. It's always resulted in further marginalization and so on, exploitation.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to, and we're also aware that in many ways our systems are structured to prevent ordinary people from imagining the future and imagining systems beyond what we're told we have to navigate. And so we wanted to create space and time and resources for folks to come together and collectively imagine futures and to craft worlds based on those imaginings. So that's what we do.
And I love that because, I very recently I wrote a blog post about art, and some of the questions that I've been asking myself around them. And one of them is, like, who gets to create art? Because anyone can create art at any point in time. Like, that is, I firmly believe everybody's creative. Everybody's capable of creating art. Anyone can create art. But if you think about you talk about narratives, and we're going to get to that shortly. If you think about the narratives around what is good art or the popular art forms, or all of those things are around certain people or certain groups of people. And, it may then lead you as an artist to think like, is my art going to be legitimate in this space? Like, who gets to create art? Who gets to display it? Who gets to decide how much it costs? Like, like so many questions that I had. And part of the reason I was asking that was because I was trying to decide, like, I went to an exhibition by Mickalene Thomas. I don't know if you're familiar with her, and it was called All About Love. And it had loads of her exhibits. It was in London. I'm in the UK at the moment. So it was, and then I had gone with a friend of mine who is a previous guest on the podcast, Karen, who is an artist and a photographer and all the things. And so she and I had just gone. We just were like, let's take the day off from work and go. And I went in and I was just like astonished, right? It was things, but there was also like mixed media, but then there was all these installations with, like, she'd made furniture, and she'd like music exhibit that I can't even, like, I tried to describe in my blog, and I'm not even sure I described it well, but she created a whole kind of installation from this song.
Wow.
It's called Black Angels. And I was like, I just sat there for like 20 minutes, like trying not to like bawl in public in this. It was just like, it kind of made me think, like, who even decides what art is? Like, how have we decided this thing, there's visual art and there's this and there's that. And she's like, I don't care about any of that. I want everything. She does photography. Sometimes she does this, and she just put it all together. And it just really got me thinking about, like, can my podcast be art? Can my, all of those ideas I was thinking about, who are the gatekeepers,
right?
Who gets to make those decisions? And I don't think I wasn't asking it for an answer, but it was more a question out there, because I think, we then start to question what we may believe about art and what its purpose is, what purpose it can hold. Can we imagine a future that we can then build? Like, all of those questions. So got me thinking about that.
That's really interesting, because it makes me think, like, I've been thinking about, like, art is like a way of seeing or being or understanding, more than, and sometimes that makes its way into something material in order to communicate, oh, this is what I thought or felt or subconsciously processed through my psyche, so like it's also a way initially for us to like just put our thoughts in front of ourselves so that we can be in conversation with ourselves. But yeah, I really love the idea of thinking about art as like, is something natural that is available to us as humans.
Yes. Yeah. And if you think about it, for a lot of what we think of as early human civilization, most of what we have left as a sign of those people is art. Whether you say they used it for communication or whatever. One of my guests that I interviewed a couple of weeks ago, one of the things she said to me, she was like, all art is a conversation. And that any art, whether it be a piece of music or a painting or a mixed media or a book or a podcast or a poem or whatever. Like if all art is a conversation, then I think anything could be art, right? Even the conversation that you're having with somebody else. So I like the idea of it being first a conversation with yourself, right? This is something that I feel and I'm trying to find a way to express it, and then bringing conversation, whether you maybe you don't share that art, maybe you do, but if you share it, the idea that you're then starting a conversation with others.
Yeah.
And I really like that. So I love the sort of idea of having that studio where you are inviting Black imagination to have its own space. I feel like space is an important concept when it comes to creativity. And so I'm creating a space for, and not just a space, but I think safe space is a really important concept in terms of things. I think of all the people I know, including myself, who've had bad, they call it art trauma, where you have these memories of somebody saying like, that looks awful, because you're trying to draw a shoe or whatever in art class, and all that art trauma. And it just makes me think like you need a safe space to imagine, to dream, to build that muscle, to create, and then to be able to kind of express it. So that's what you're trying to create. I'd love to talk a little bit, because obviously you talked about being involved in your work in terms of social justice, and then kind of making a decision to lean into art. But I feel like you've really brought that social justice work with you. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about that intersection. Did you always feel like they belonged, like, to like social justice and that work? Did you always feel like creativity and art had a place in it?
It's interesting because when I look back, I feel like they they were not separate for me until I started doing a certain kind of social justice work. Like when I think about, again, using like my parents as kind of like ends of a spectrum in a way, I feel like when I look at the work that my dad was doing, it was very much social change, social sector, without much art. And then I look at what my mom was doing and I'm like, but that is the work that really helped me understand what needed to change in society. It was like, like the kind of theater people were making was about social issues and about, like what happens after colonialism and people's relationship with their governments and disappointment and things like that. So I'm kind of like, well, that it was always integrated because who we are as a society is always part of the artist's life, right?
Yeah. And I'm thinking, you said that, and the first thing that came to my mind is social commentary and growing up with a calypso tent and like
exactly
those competitions,
exactly.
like it was almost like you're coming to this calypso competition and one of those songs had to be social commentary, and it was very, there was no space between that social political commentary and the music and the for, you know, in Barbados is crop over obviously for a Trinidad Tobago, but like there was no space, you know, all in the myths of crop over.
Right.
Every year there was a song about what's going on, and I could track like the politics of the 80s and the 90s through the songs that were being sung in those years, right? And so I feel like you know, to me that's a better way to try to remember history than somebody telling me, you know, what happened in 1842 or whatever. Right? But it was so obvious and so clear that those things were all combined, and the sort of the politics of the day were very wrapped up in the music, as you say, the theater, the art, that type of thing. So I find it interesting that you talk about moving away from that.
It kind of feels like when maybe as I'm thinking about it, is like the art space always has lots of room for the conversation about politics and society, and maybe the political / social sector doesn't necessarily, it's just about who's leading and how much of themselves they're bringing to that conversation, I guess, or to that, what they're working on.
Yeah.
So I feel like I spent quite a bit of time in community organizing work that definitely was grounded in the culture of the community that it was part of. Like, it wasn't like devoid of culture writ large, it's like we would gather people around holidays and food and like so on and so forth. But I think like the integration of art as an integral part of it wasn't always present. And then sometimes it was. I remember like I worked at a place that called Close to Home that was doing sort of organizing communities around domestic violence prevention and violence prevention writ large, like in their neighborhood. And they would the youth group always made like a mural, that was in the train station nearby. So there was like a consciousness for sure that like we can use art to communicate our ideas with the larger public. And there's like this acknowledgement that like if we want to reach people who aren't going to just come to our meetings and have, discussions about these issues, we're going to need to use art and definitely culture, like more broadly speaking, to engage people, to connect with them, to communicate something that maybe is more difficult to communicate in other ways. So it's kind of been in and out, and like lots of different relationships to how important it is and so on. But I'm definitely like finding like this space where, this kind of ecosystem of collaborators and, other organizations that are kind of, believe that like art is integral to the social change process, and it always has been.
Yes.
The issue is convincing the people with resources.
The funder, exactly. And that is always the thing. So let's fast forward a little bit to the actual space that you are creating that's going to be opening later this month. Tell us a little bit about that project, how you kind of imagined it, obviously, because it was come from someone's imagination, not yours and collaborative of your colleagues. How you imagined it, and what type of space you've created, and a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So we were connected to a network within the reparations movement here in the United States. It was mostly folks working on policy. And the intent of this connection was for us to all to develop an approach to narrative that would help to catalyze a movement for reparations. So the sort of the question we were all charged with as a network was, how do we create compelling narratives that invite people to advocate for reparations, and mostly reparations policy? And as the artist in that group, like, it's not really the way you enter making art about something. Like, it's very like narrative for policy, narrative campaign focused. But one of the narrative opportunities that was unearthed within that space was this idea that, that imagining new worlds or imagining beyond our current reality was an opportunity for integrating reparations narrative. And that because of the general political moment that we had been in and that are in, there's lots of desire to know what comes next and to know what future we're heading towards. And it's interesting because I think we're in the US, especially now, we're experiencing that question as a crisis. But I actually think it just makes sense for the society at the point that it's at anyway. Like, we need to be considering that question anyway. The problem is there was a vacuum in considering that question that led to like this person offering their ideas for what could come next and it not being a very beautiful vision. But anyway, that opportunity to really craft a vision for the future that could animate and excite people around reparations and almost more broadly a culture of repair.
Yes.
As something we could adopt as a way to move towards a vision of a more beautiful, more expansive future felt really compelling to us. It felt really aligned with what we do around Black imagination and world building. So we jumped in. We decided that's what we're going to do. We're going to cultivate a vision for the some futures of repair, acknowledging that the same way there are actually many worlds now in reality. People have lots of different experiences. That the future also, there's many different futures.
Yes.
That are available to us and that will coexist. And so we were like, we need a compelling vision for the future, and it needs to be a future that has been shaped by repair. That has shifted us to a culture where repair is normal. That we acknowledge that harm happens. It's humans. We're not perfect. We unintentionally transgress each other, sometimes intentionally, but knowing how to repair that harm is something that can become the hallmark of our society versus denying the harm, ignoring it, or perpetuating it.
Yeah. And even like, it's, you talk about narratives around reparation. Sometime last year, there was this TV show in the UK where they talk about current events, and it travels around the country, and it came to my university late last year. So I went to be a part of the screening, and one of the topics that came up was reparations, because it was right around the time. I'm not going to really go into it. If anybody wants a link, let me know. But it was right around the time where there was a big conversation happening here in the UK and world around reparations. And one of the big sort of conversations about it was that the idea of reparations is very past facing. It's like, you want me to pay for something that my great 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 grandfather did, and I didn't do anything to you. And, and it's almost this idea that in order to move forward, you need to kind of let go of that past. And if we keep carrying it, that in itself will be a constant source of tension. And to me, because I like words and everything, I like the idea of taking it back to repair, because same conversation, there was a lot of conversations about the tensions that exist between groups of people. And I think what is always missing from that conversation is the idea of repair and the forward lookingness of it, right?
Yeah.
Of that idea of, a while ago, I wanted to run this workshop, and I even created like a whole card deck for it called Dreaming.
Nice.
Called Dreaming Black Joy, and it was just this idea that you cannot build a world that you cannot envision, right?
Yep.
And so the idea of dreaming, of imagination, of using the power of that to envision a world that you want to build and then move towards it. I like the fact that you don't have this idea of like, in order to do that, you must just ignore the past and be like, okay, that's behind us now. And the only way to move forward is to just start from zero. So I love all of that coming together, but I also love coming up with a narrative that takes us forward into culture of repair, a culture of repairing and community, as opposed to just being like, well, that thing happened 20 something how many years ago, and let's not think about that anymore. So I really, that's sorry. I have thoughts, right? I'm like, oh, I don't even. Anyway, I love that. I love the dreaming. I love the imagination. I love the idea of and the reality, right? That you cannot build something if you can't vision it. Like, it's almost impossible to build something if you don't know what it's going to look like, right? And yes, there are things that you're going to want to tear down or remove, but you also have to have time and space to dream of what you want next. So
yes, I love that. Yes, exactly.
Yes. So let's keep talking about this space that you're cultivating. So you guys decided you wanted to jump into sort of crafting these many futures, and tell us a little bit about the space that has kind of grown from that.
Sure. Yeah. So we felt like, we wanted to focus repair around relationships. So we chose to focus on 6 different relationships at different levels that we felt would be facilitated by reparations or by a repair process. And, we felt, okay, people, and a part of it was thinking about like, it isn't just like, okay, like somebody's ancestors did something to my ancestor, like it was like an acute action. It was like understanding the nature of the harm, like what was lost, what was taken away. It wasn't just, somebody hit somebody. Like it was like our ancestors lost the right to shape their own sense of self, like to decide who is in their community and who they can love, like to practice their traditions and, to decide what kind of society or community they want to have, to decide even what cosmology or worldview shapes their understanding, and so on. And so we were like, okay, these are some of the harms, and we want to understand repair through the lens of those and think about a process that repairs each of those relationships. So repairs my sense of self, repairs my relationship to my community, repairs my relationship to like structures and systems that govern my day-to-day life, repairs my relationship to my cosmology, like the worldview that underpins all of these things, repairs relationship to the land, and then repairs our relationship to my sense of lineage, to my ancestry and my future. And so we did a world building session around each of these sort of futures, where each of these relationships have been repaired through the process of reparations. And then we invited 6 Afrofuturist artists to be with us in those world building sessions and to create works of art that reflect their experience of the sessions and also their own thinking and reflection on repair. And we didn't want to restrict them too much because we were like, artists, I don't, like you have your own process for like thinking and being with how you make art. And these world building sessions are an offering to provide some context, but you don't have to like map to it directly. That we trust that the invitation to reflect on repair will allow them to produce works of art that are compelling and meaningful. And we invited them to create interactive pieces. We said we want this to be what our understanding of immersive, which means people can see themselves inside of the artwork. Like the artwork is an extension of an action they're taking or a space that they're in, versus something they're just like looking at and see themselves as outside of. And so, the artists they're working on those works of art. We're working on a series of meditations based on the different future worlds. And all of this will live inside of this restorative nightlife space, where people are invited to come, interact with the artworks, lounge, drink some tea, connect with other people. It'll be a pretty intimate space, probably not more than 20 people in it at the same time. And we're calling it like a social dream space, where folks can come and connect to art, connect to their imaginations, and connect to each other. And I just said that like that for the first time, so I've had to like note it.
Well,
because I'm like,
being recorded, and it's being video recorded as well. So if you want a snippet of yourself saying that for the socials, then I can. So that's no problem at all. Great, and I love. And to me, that is just the perfect description of it, right? That is just perfect in the sense of perfect for that space at this time, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about the logistics of this, just for a short moment, because I think one of the things that I love about art is somebody had an idea, somebody had a dream, and it's now a thing that's out there in the real world, right?
Yeah.
I love that so much. I love that, especially as a creative who has literally 1 million ideas every single day and knows that there is a distance between the imagination and the manifestation of it in the real world. And I think sometimes that can be a hard gap to bridge. It's in some ways, I think it's I know there are many reasons we talked earlier about, sometimes there's a privilege to who gets to manifest their ideas out into the world. So we understand that. But I think there's also, sometimes it can be hard to navigate the logistics of bringing a vision to the world, especially if it's a big vision. Like I always think about this podcast, because when I started it, I had like this huge vision that was like, I can't the edges of it. And I sat with that vision for years because I couldn't figure out how to bring it into the world. And someone said to me, like, what's a small version of that you can create? And that was how I was actually able to start to encapsulate different things and actually produce something. So tell us a little bit about the process of bringing that vision to life, because I think that would be it's good for people to hear that and give them a bit of inspiration for their ideas,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's kind of been like that, like we've been wanting to experiment with immersive experiences for a long time, or interactive or transformative experiences. Like we had this hypothesis that, transformative cultural experiences really help to facilitate transformation and change and connection to, thoughts and philosophies and action and so on. And so we started really small. Like in 2017, we had an opportunity. We had created like a idea for a book, and we hadn't even published the book, but we were talking about the idea for the book on a podcast. And someone at a university art gallery reached out to us and was like, I heard y'all talking about this book. Do you want to make the ideas in the book come to life in some way in this gallery space? And we were like, okay, that's cool. Like, sure, let's try that. And we just had like a little, like a little booth where we could sort of play with like, what might it mean to like make some of the speculative ideas real, like actually materially real. And we had a little bit of a budget that they gave us. And it was our first time really doing like kind of an interactive art installation. And then we were hooked after that. We were like, it's so fun for us. It's so meaningful. It was so beautiful to see how people interacted with it. And so, every opportunity we got to like do something related to art, especially art and social change, we would like suggest like, let us do this immersive installation. Like, and, we had another opportunity during the pandemic. We did a virtual interactive sort of presentation, like kind of theater thing. And that was really fun. We learned a lot. And every step we're just learning a lot about like what it takes, both what it takes and also learning about what we want to do. So we did a couple cycles of that, and also doing the kind of behind the scenes work to sort of present this form of art making to the folks that are supporting the work, to help them, to kind of convince them that this too is art, like installation is art, yes. Immersive experience is art. It can be a valuable way to broach some of the issues you're trying to discuss, some of the campaigns that you're working on. And so every time we did it, we would be like, okay, next time we want it to be bigger, or like more budget. And somehow the opportunities always found us. And so, we learned our own methodology. So a lot of it, with this round in particular, so building on a few years of experience, maybe doing like one large installation a year, but often just as a pop-up experience, very short term. We were like, okay, we want it to be a long-term experience because we need folks to come back and be immersed in the space repeatedly. And we felt, let's just start doing the world building. And through doing the world building and inviting the right people, someone will want to resource this. So we did a world building sessions, particularly for people in philanthropy. And we were like, we'll see who's interested. We don't know. Like, we haven't really talked to any philanthropic partners about this idea. But we did a world building session for them. We kind of positioned it as like for them to think strategically about how they approach repair work. And like 150 of them like signed up and came. We were like, wow. Okay, this must be really resonant. And then of the people who came, like maybe like 3 people wanted to like support what we were talking about in the next phase. So we really just took it phase by phase, not knowing what would come next. So a combination of like putting the idea out there, raising a little bit of money based on what we put out there, kind of lining up potential collaborators in case we got the money. And then when we got a really substantial contribution from one of the philanthropic partners, we were like, okay, we're ready to go. Like, it's full on. And so we start to build our team because our in-house team is really small. It's 4 of us. And now that we have the project money, we need to like make the team more robust. And we had learned that like we need to, if we're going to work with 6 different artists, we need someone who's just working with the artists. So because it's just a lot to like, a lot of conversation to have. Yeah. And like navigate. And so we brought in onto our team like a curator whose job is just to like facilitate the artist's connection to the process, like to help them think through like what they're making, to just be in conversation with them, helping them buy their materials and making sure they're okay and that they're feeling good, helping to like document like their reflections. So she does that. And then over time, we're just building a team. Then we added like the PR team. So you're like, our lesson learned is like, often we don't have capacity to do the right amount of publicity for our projects because we're so in the making, like that. We usually think about it like 2 weeks before. We're like, oh, I guess we should do some publicity. And then we're not that great at it. So we're like, no, we have to bring on the PR team. Then because of who our funder is, they are a public health funder. So for them, they are interested in the role of democracy of imagination and how that shapes like a culture of health. So their hypothesis is that if communities that have been marginalized have opportunities to envision and imagine, then they will be more healthy communities. So we felt, okay, let's do a little bit of research in the project. So we brought on a research partner to kind of understand like the extent to which our project helps to catalyze imagination around repair and reparations. So we just kind of rolled on these different like collaborators, rolled on the artists, did a whole retreat to think about which artists do we want to be in conversation with about this topic, and what is our capacity? What do we have capacity to support? in terms of like travel and shipping and things like that. So invited 6 artists to kind of join us. And then, about a month ago, we invited on a producer because now we're getting ready for like literally the artists are making their works of art, but now we need to like have the space ready and like navigate shipping. And we also invited someone to design the space for us because, it's not just an exhibit, but it's a space that we want people to feel is really restorative as a whole.
Yeah.
So they're doing some space design. Essentially, logistically, it's a lot of contractors.
Yeah.
Everyone's a contractor.
Yeah. I totally get that. And one thing that you said many things you said stood out to me, but one thing stood out to me in particular when you talked about getting PR, because I'm like, I'm into like I've almost hit like the 4-year anniversary of this podcast. I love the conversations. Oh, thank you. I love the conversation. Love recording it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm all lit up. And then like this week I sit down to edit it and my mood starts to do this, right?
Yeah.
By the time I've edited everything and done all the imagery, had to create all the images and I've uploaded it to the platform and whatever, suddenly I'm like, I didn't really tell anybody I was launching next week,
Yeah.
Maybe I should do it. And by that point, I am so wiped out. I'm like, I don't have the capacity. So it's just like almost like a whimper. And that's purely my fault. I know it's purely my fault. It's just what happens if you're trying to do everything yourself, right? And so I think it's just a good reminder to anybody who wants to create those larger events, whether it be like you guys are putting together a whole like long-term vision, that's something like I'm not going to call it a nightclub because that conjures out certain images. I'm going to call it a evening club, right? But like some sort of gathering space, shall we say, meets an immersive art gallery, right? But like I love hearing that you started small with like one immersive piece and then it's grown into that thing, because I think it is true that the more you actually do something, the clearer the idea becomes, the clearer you become on what it requires. And the bigger you can make it because you actually have a concept of how to put it out there. So that's a really good, I love that. Really amazing. What are some obstacles that you have faced in this process that were, let's say, informative to you?
The major obstacle I think I and the team would agree on is finding the right space. It's very difficult in New York City. It's like you have a vision for the kind of space that would be conducive to the project. And then space is just like literally like, so it's so tricky in New York, like either like there's the perfect space, but it's a crazy price, it's out of control, like the price, or it's, like figuring out the right neighborhood too. Like we want it to be a neighborhood that our community would go to, thinking about how far it is also from our studio space, like where we are, our main studio space. Yeah, I think we spent a year almost looking for the space, even as the project was underway. Like we kind of knew we wanted to do something even before we got the grant. So we had already started like looking, just curious to see what was out there. But we spent so long, like, going with folks to see spaces and like just understanding like occupancy and zoning and price. And then sometimes in New York, like the people who own the spaces, they have a certain vision for what happens in there, and they don't like your vision. So then they're like, no, or they're like, take a long time to respond. Sometimes they're just racist, like, legit, like they just don't want you in there. Or they're like, they don't believe your idea.
They don't believe it.
Like I remember at one of the spaces, they were like, you're not doing like a nightclub, are you? And we're like, it's not a nightclub. Like, it's like legitimately not a nightclub. Like, we just tell them it's an art gallery, but they don't believe us because we're Black. And they assume, oh, Black folks with a space are going to do a certain thing. So it was challenging to find a space, to find someone to help us find a space. to find a space within our budget, but we were able to, thankfully. And it's not that far from our studio space, and it's expensive, but within our budget. And yeah, that is, and it was also really interesting to find out that, like, you know, Black people don't own a lot of commercial space in New York. You know, so it's just interesting to be like, whoa, okay, most of the space is not owned by folks who would feel excited about our project, you know, or interested in it in other ways. And so that just gets us thinking about, you know, like, we do imagine like a time where we can cultivate more space for artists, and like, what is it, you know, we would love to make this process easier for other folks in the future. Like, you know, if we either owned or had a long-term lease on a space that we could offer to artists to bring their ideas to life, it feels like kind of maybe part of the Black imagination vision, that people can have space to present their ideas and their projects. And there's only so much we can curate ourselves directly. And then otherwise it feels like, oh, we'd love to just make space where people can just be like, reserve it, and we don't have to be involved in the thinking about it.
Exactly. And to me, it also speaks to the reality of creating something that does not exist, and getting people on board with that vision, right? It's almost easier to get people on board with a nightclub because at least they know what it is and they can say or no. But if you're saying this is, you know, you're saying it's an art gallery, they might think art galleries don't make any money. How are they going to pay their, like, there's so many possible ideas that they might be having when you're creating something that's not a mainstream thing as well.
So
I think that speaks to that as well.
Definitely.
I love that so much, though. I love that you have been able to get to the point where you're talking about opening your doors. So tell us a little bit about the grand opening. What's happening, or as much or as little as you want to tell us, if you want it to be a surprise.
No, it's not that. It's just as much or little as I know, because in this last couple of weeks, I've really doubled down on delegating to my team, because one of my experiences in the past is that if I don't delegate, then I'm so close to production that I'm not making the creative pieces that I need to make as part of the show. So that the actual opening is one of the things that I have kind of delegated. So I might not be the most up to date on what's happening, but so we have two opening events at least. One is kind of like a preview for press and funders. So people who either have funded or may be interested to fund. It's a more low key event where I've heard talk about like a dinner that might be happening that day, where we'll get to be in like a bit of conversation about the ethos and about the space, and people can get to interact with each artwork in a more, you know, in a more private setting. And then the real opening is on the 25th of July, and that will be like a public opening. And I've heard talk about a party and drumming and so on. That's really all I know about the second one. Oh, I think there will be like packages, at least for folks. I don't know which one. But we're compiling like these packets that will include some of the restorative teas that we're having, that we're creating, that each tea maps to each world. And we've had like our herbalists kind of like make these blends that kind of cultivate the intention of the future world that they map to. And also this manifesto that we're writing that reflects the world building that we've done. So we want to share some of those during the opening as well. And I don't know, just greet people and welcome them. That's my intention, you know, in addition to whatever my team is planning, is to really greet people and welcome them. And I love to kind of be kind of in a corner observing how people interact with the art and interact with the space. I really see like each space that we create is an offering to our community. And we don't have any certainty of how it will impact them. So it's always like kind of a beautiful, like serendipitous feeling to observe the way they are receiving that space and what it is doing for them that we certainly hoped it would, but, you know, couldn't say for sure. So I'm looking forward to that, to just seeing people feel welcomed and restored and feel like it's a space for them. Yeah.
I love that. That sounds amazing. And I know that you're in preparation, as you said, for know, your own creative piece as well. So I hope that goes, let's say, smoothly over the next.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're recording this a couple of weeks out from opening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love this. This has been an amazing conversation. We're at the point of thinking about wrapping up now, but I'll have to have you back at some point after you've been open for a while, and you can talk a little bit about
absolutely
space has changed. Because if there's one thing I know about creative projects, is that they evolve,
yes
and
yeah
you kind of want them to as well. So I love that. And
yeah
I think for you guys, that going back to that idea of art as a conversation, if these pieces, especially because they're interactive, if you think of that sort of restoration narrative being in conversation with your patrons, with the people who are interacting with, I imagine that conversation will start to add itself to the space.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you will have that sort of evolution from there. This has been amazing. Now, just before we go, I usually have a little lightning round of just a few questions that I ask.
Sure.
We'll put about, I always say 3 minutes on the clock, but it's usually more like 5 minutes because we talk. But I'm going to put a few minutes on the clock and let's go from there. So, what is bringing you joy right now?
My niece and nephew, my sister and my niece and nephew and their father just moved a few blocks from me after living in another state. So they're having my family as my neighbors.
I love that. I wish my sisters are not moving from Barbados to England, so that's not happening. But I always love going to see my sisters and my niece and my nephews. So I feel you on that entirely. What is something you want to try for fun?
There's so many things. I want to try an ecstatic dance experience.
I love that. I love that. Well, now that you have the space, maybe you have to make it happen. So let's see what happens there. That sounds amazing. So I usually ask my guests if they have any daily joy practices, but I'm going to ask you a different question. What are some practices you have to cultivate that imagination and that dreaming space for yourself?
I try two things that come to mind. I try to meditate every day for about 25 minutes to tap into my intuition, which I feel is the source of imagination for me. And I make collages. And so I use collages as my own personal imagining and world building process, literally making worlds that I want to experience, but also that reflect my inner psyche a bit.
I love that. What is a quote that represents or brings you joy?
Quote that represents or brings me joy. I don't know. Don't stop believing.
I'll go with that. That's absolutely great. I love that one. What is something that always makes you laugh?
My partner. He's just silly and funny. Nice. And he always makes me laugh.
What is something that you dread but always feels good afterwards?
Public speaking, I guess.
I feel.
Yeah, I always feel stage fright feels like dread. And then after I've done it, I always feel really proud of myself and excited for that opportunity to connect with people. And to feel like I contributed to, something beautiful in their day.
I love that. And what are you dreaming about?
I am dreaming about, my consistent dream and personal vision is about having a home in the Caribbean, and I can't say specifically where because I can't decide, because I keep oscillating between what's possible and what my heart really wants. But it's on a hill. I already can see the house. It's on a hill. On one side, it goes down towards a community where I feel like connected to that community, but I also have the solitude that I need to really make art. And on the other side of the hill, it goes down to a beach. And I invite people in to a dinner party once a month to just gather and connect. And I go down to my community at least once a week to like go to the market and like connect with people. And people kind of know me as like the kind of quiet loner-ish, but like I'm not an outcast. I'm really part of that community. Like people understand like I'm making art, so I just need, like I'm not down in the market every day. So that's my dream. It's like my vision, and I'm working towards that being like real, or wanting that to be real, but also using it as a metaphor for like other parts of life.
I love that. And I'm coming to visit, so
of course.
You posted, and I'll be there as it happens. So that sounds amazing.
Yes.
Oh, this has been totally and completely awesome, Aisha. I really enjoyed our conversation. It could have gone in a million different directions, so I may need to have you back. But this has been great. I've loved it, and I wish you all the best with the new space next time.
Thank you.
In the area. Come down.
Yes, please. Please do.
Well, I will. My best friend lives in New Jersey and has done for a long time, but she still works in the city. So next time I visit her, which needs to be soon because I miss her, I'm going to come. We're going to come down
please do
and drink some tea.
Yes, please do. I'm excited to host you and to meet you.
I can't wait. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks so much for saying yes to the impromptu recording. All the best for your project coming to life, your vision coming to life so soon. And I wish you the best of luck. Thank you, listeners, for sticking with us, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the show notes below. And don't forget to hit subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, I send you big love.